At the far end of the universe, there is a planet ruled by a being of utter evil.
I want them to down and roar for me!
You see this board here? Every time he kills somebody, I put a red pin in it. So far, the only thing that I've got to show for it, these little calling cards here, a whole bunch of these.
Somebody help me!
Now let me tell you something about this Punisher. If he ever shows up within 1,000 yards of me, he'll find out what the word punished really means.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon,
we're talking Dolph's, deep-rooted heritage, the Japanese, in our next episode. So join the sleaze.
we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over 3 years. There's something like 70-plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films.
Yeah.
So there's lots of stuff available for you guys. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you're interested in that. And speaking of which, we did have a lot of people make the jump this week, so we'll give them their shout-outs here. We have Nunilo Campbell, we have Seb Dector, Drew, and also Drew Mascarelli. So 2 Drews back-to-back. Thank you both.
Thank you, Drews.
Jake, Jared Wimburn, Matthew Wood, Vojtek Tulik. We're going back to the Josh mispronounces your name speed round. Justin Miller, James Wilson, Matt Daniel, Tim C, and Thomas Connolly, not Bookshop. Don't know what that means, but thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much,
Hope you guys are enjoying all those bonus episodes. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you are. I see you right now listening. Scroll down to the very bottom and give us a good old rating and review down there. It helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and find new listeners. So those are the 2 plug. Oh, and the third plug, merch. If you it's kind of newer. I guess I've been doing it for a while now. This intro has become a mouthful. If you guys like the horror art that local artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything you want. Shirts, mugs, pillows, notebooks, whatever you can think of, you can probably find it in the merch shop. That is... there's a link to that in the description down below, as well as at sleazoidspodcast.com. And, whew,
we did
all
it.
Right. That's the intro. Welcome back to another episode. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks ago, you guys, free listeners, would have last heard from us, and we would have had special guest Hessa, or maybe some of you know better on Twitter as Zero Suit Camus, and she came on to talk about psychic breakdowns on the streets of New York, one by Nicolas Cage, one by Harvey Keitel in the films Vampire's Kiss from 1988 and Bad Lieutenant from 1992. We did a really long episode with Hessa. We had a great time breaking down both of those iconic performances, and we had an absolute blast doing that. So if you haven't heard that episode, again, that's any podcast listener of choice. That was 2 weeks ago. But last week's episode, exclusive for the patrons, we went back into the realm of screen and behind-the-screen auteur Sylvester Stallone. We talked about Rocky 3 and Rocky 4. And I know some of you might have went, well, you guys just did Rocky and Rocky 2 like not that long ago. What's going on there? And we finally have a little bit of an answer for you guys. We announced it on that episode. But we are going to be doing something a little bit different this month. And we have a very special guest here joining us to partake in the first episode of what is going to be a themed month here. And before we announce the thing, I'm going to introduce him. We have a special guest. He is a film writer and a I don't know if you want to. I mean, you guys should be following him on Twitter because he makes very funny tweets that people sometimes get angry at. We have
That's always fun.
No, never.
It's never happened before.
I'm a clean comic.
We have Ethan Vestby joining us. Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very happy to talk about Gary Goddard, a ranking lieutenant in Bryan Singer's Hollywood pedophile ring.
That is partially what we're going to be talking about. That is not
exactly
the
why we
month.
brought you on.
However, that is the themed month.
It's after dark, boys.
Here we go. we do have a Discord channel called the After Dark where they are always hunting down the conspiracies for us. So we are partially going to be talking about that this week, but specifically I wanted to bring Ethan on because Ethan, he is someone who, like us, I think, there's a lot of art out there that people dismiss and they kind of wave their hand at, and we don't really like to do that here on this show. And there's a particular actor that we're going to be talking about this week that I thought Ethan could lend his voice to a little bit here. And speaking of which, we have opened up brand new Sleazoids hotline.
That's right.
So far, only one caller. Only one guy has the number, but
yeah, it's
I'm sure people might get
access.
the number. Yeah, it's a phone line we leave open for him if he ever wants to talk to us. But we have a message on the phone line, so we're going to take a quick listen at that, and that'll probably guide us into what we're going to be doing this week and for the entirety of this month. So, Jamie, let's do that.
Hey, Josh and Jamie, this is your boy, Dolph here.
Yes.
I just want to say
Our
I've
boy.
enjoyed 3 years of your show. Congratulations.
He's a big fan.
What a nice
we're
man.
just going to hang in there in these crazy times, work out,
Yes.
stay strong, believe in ourselves, do positive affirmations about the future, and everything's going to be fine. So good luck with the future of your show. And look, you better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, Dolph. That's
Thanks
awesome.
so much, friend of the pod, Dolph Lundgren, for calling in. I'm definitely feeling like it's time for me to start working out, having watched that message.
The I must break you thing, though, sounds like targeted harassment to me.
Yeah. I mean, if any of our listeners were afraid by that part, feel free to message us and we will we'll talk you through it.
Yeah.
But yes, that's what we're going to be talking about this month. We asked Dolph if he would send if he'd call in, because we were going to do an entire themed month of his films. We haven't talked about him yet on the show, other than doing Rocky IV, which we just did last week for the bonus listeners, which was one of his first major role, I guess, because other than his small little cameo in A View to Kill, he didn't really do anything else. But we are going to be talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Dolph Lundgren with Ethan this week. So we are going to be starting with his first sort of major leading roles, which kind of mixed results right off the start. But he only got right after Rocky IV. He even says he walked out of that theater. Basically, he was a confirmed movie star, and he was getting calls and he was getting deals for everything. So we're going to be talking about one of the first ones he did, Masters of the Universe, where he literally played the little He-Man toy from 1987, as Ethan already mentioned, directed by other friend of the show, Gary Goddard.
Yeah.
And then we are going to be pairing that with one of his, just a couple years later, his another attempt at a leading role in kind of like a geek property turned genre film. We're going to be talking about The Punisher from 1989, directed by legitimate legend of the show, because he only made 2 movies, and we've kind of, spoiler alert, kind of liked them both. Mark Goldblatt. who very famously was the editor on like some of just the greatest action movies of the 80s. He worked on Terminator, he worked on Commando, he worked on First Blood Part 2, Bad Boys 2, even a couple Verhoeven films like Starship Troopers and Showgirls. So very excited to see what him and Dolph Lundgren can kind of get up together. And after that, we're going to be doing an entire month kind of going a little bit chronologically from his late 80s leading roles to, eventually his TV movie and direct-to-video era by the end that kind of got started in the late 90s. So that being said, I think we are just going to jump right into it this week. Masters of the Universe.
From a distant galaxy, they have come to Earth. Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, Frank Langella as Skeletor. Only they have the powers to be Masters of the Universe. Live the adventure.
All right, we are talking Masters of the Universe, the 1987 American science fiction fantasy action film directed by Gary Goddard, and also, as we've mentioned them tons of times on the show, produced by Yoram Globus and Menahem Golan, the heads of Canon Films. We are, because of the show, we have tackled a large portion of the Canon catalog. Yeah. But we haven't yet, I don't think, because we talked about Cyborg, which was kind of like a little bit post-bankruptcy with Albert Pyun. We haven't talked about like the peak movies that actually led them into bankruptcy, which is very exciting because that's exactly what we're talking about today. Basically, one of the movies that destroyed them when they started, when they shifted from the Canon era of, making 30 films for $20 million and waiting to see which one of them became a success and then franchising from there. When they started trying to get into the major studio game, and, nothing says that more than Masters of the Universe, giant toy/cartoon brand, and they spent like $25 million or something on this movie.
Yeah.
So
they did not make the money back.
No, and I think before it came out, I think this was the one that they pitched as this was Star Wars for the 80s.
Meets Conan? Oh, okay, yeah.
No, they literally said that it was this was the new Star Wars. That was it.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's some stuff that I feel like they're like directly, like shots they're directly ripping off from Star Wars, such as a Skeletor walking in front of his little henchman feels exactly like Darth Vader in front of the bounty hunters in Empire Strikes Back, and also I'll just say someone getting tossed down a chute at the end is exactly like the Emperor falling to his death in Return of the Jedi.
All of the soldiers, which are, instead of like white stormtroopers, they're in all black, and they all have like Darth Vader helmets with their blasters and stuff too, and just having blasters in He-Man. I mean, I never watched He-Man. Did anyone? Did you watch He-Man? He-Man's past our time, I feel like.
It was a little, before my time. I think my chief association with He-Man is the viral He-Man share hey hey video from 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
So I don't think anyone here will be critiquing it based on its faithfulness to the toy catalog.
No, I think what He-Man was supposed to be is essentially just that, like, that kind of medieval fantasy thing, like Conan, but then with laser swords and laser guns and all that. So it's like sci-fi mixed with kind of like barbarian stuff.
Which is funny because we've talked about that before, and it's been done like not terribly before. Yeah. We talked Krull, which was say what you will about some of the elements of Krull. It's a fairly handsomely made film by Peter Yates, and I think Shishitsky shot that film, and there's some really cool merging of science fiction and fantasy sequences, like in Krull they have like the giant head spaceship where they're like inside the mouth and the eyes and stuff that they like stole straight from like Zardoz or something like that. But I guess what we're saying here is that this is the canon version of that. That was a very expensively made film. Canon, this is expensive for them, but they are doing some of the sort of like the chintzy workarounds that they typically do. I mean, I noticed right off the start in here they have like a mirrored reverse shot in like the first like 3 minutes of the movie. It's just like a huge matte painting shot of all like the creatures walking towards Castle Grayskull, and you see it as like the introductory shot where the people are walking towards it as Skeletor is holding like his big monologue meeting about how he's in control and power now and whatever, and then they cut later to it like not even probably like 2.5 minutes when He-Man and his team is like outside the castle, and it's literally just the exact same shot but flipped.
Right.
Nothing different about it. And like that's the kind of thing that Canon would do to save money, because it's another matte painting they don't have to do. It's another it's another thing. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that went on in the making of Canon, and especially around this time.
And don't forget, there's a great action sequence set in a high school gymnasium.
Well, that's the amazing thing that we'll definitely get to. But this is of that era where, like, they spent all their money on the fantasy set pieces in, like, the first 15 minutes. And then they have everyone go to Earth because they couldn't afford more, which we were just talking about when we did Albert Pyun's Doll Man recently. Yeah. Which has, like, this great premise of, like an alien Dirty Harry comes to Earth, and when he comes to Earth, he's a tiny little man. But as soon as he hits Earth, it's just like, kind of like a really shitty like Death Wish sequel.
Well, did you also think with this partly setting it in suburban California was them trying to get at a bit of a Spielberg thing?
A little bit, a little bit like Back to the Future with the way that it kind of ended a little bit too, where they kind of like they actually like fixed the stuff with their parents and stuff. Yeah, it's going for, I think, broad likability. You can tell that the Canon guys who have been so used to being in the schlock game, that they started getting bigger budgets and they wanted to do these big, broad, likable films, and they wanted to do a hit Warner Brothers kids film. They wanted to do something like that because they were like, you know what? Giving Toby Hooper free reign didn't make us money, even though the films were great. Like we talked about Life Force and Texas Chainsaw 2, just like probably like a year ago, and how Canon had a relationship with him and just kind of let him go crazy. And it didn't work out for them. So now they were like, okay, well, now we need a Star Wars. I mean, this literally followed them making Superman 4, right? Quest for Peace.
Year. Same summer. I think they came out within weeks of each other.
Oh, my God.
That was a dud too, right?
Both huge bombs.
Yeah, and also just a few months, if I'm correct, after Godard's King Lear premiered at Cannes. So they had this was a wild few months for them.
Yeah, Canon was really trying to get, they were trying to expand, and it didn't quite work for them. Partially because a lot of the stuff that went well for them, it was just kind of letting a crazy filmmaker go loose with a small budget. And now trying to participate in the derivative, we need to hit the beats and we need to make it on about a toy brand, and it needs to be, it needs to have a little bit of Spielberg, and it needs to have a little bit of Lucas, and, a myriad of other things. I mean, obviously Dolph Lundgren was cast in the film partially because they looked at him and they were kind of like, yeah, we can get that kind of that Arnold Conan quality, which we liked. Which they also tried to go for a little bit in Beastmaster to results that didn't really work. But at least Beastmaster had like Rip Torn sacrificing babies on temples and stuff like this. This unfortunately, you can tell was Canon really trying to go for a kids film, and right down to the action.
I'll say it felt great as a 29-year-old to sit down and take notes while watching this.
I hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say normally my notes are a little bit longer than what we're going to be talking about today because weirdly enough, despite the fact that, this was Dolph's first leading role, it is still, broadly one of the films that he is very well known for. It's kind of unfortunate for him. It's a weird place to start because it's a really important film in the Dolph catalog, being his first, really massive leading role. And
I also find he takes
it's not a cheap movie. Yeah, well, and it's just one of those things where it's probably among my least favorite like Dolph performances and movies, kind of unfortunately, because they really didn't know what to do with him. They kind of hired him once again because we talked about when we did the Conan episode, but Arnold was partially cast just because he had the physique of a guy who came out of, one of those crazy fantasy paintings.
Right.
And you can tell that they kind of did the same thing for Dolph, even though Dolph, isn't quite as big, but they just had him, he looked like an action figure. They were like, there you go. He looks like the toy. We can, put him in the outfit and he looks good. And that's all we really need to do with him. And if you watch the documentary on Canon, Electric Boogaloo, I think it was called, you can tell that everyone who was interviewed on the making of that movie was basically like, yeah, we didn't really know what we were doing. They spent most of the money on the really big Grayskull set, which at the time was like one of the biggest sets.
I was literally going to say that because it seems like that's where the majority of it went, because there's not even, I don't have a strong memory of any other set besides that one in Grayskull.
Because the rest of it is like alleys in California, or like one of the big set pieces takes place in a music store.
Well, I mean, if they made this today, I mean, they wouldn't just cast a bodybuilder who can't speak English. Which Thursday night NBC sitcom star do you think they would cast as He-Man?
That's true. They would be like, we need James Corden to get on steroids.
I guess Joel McHale was kind of ripped. They could have gotten him. He's the best of both worlds.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely what they would do. Well, and one thing watching this that I noted too is that how many of these beats are kind of what movies are still today in a lot of different ways. It's a lot of like that opening fantasy element where it gets a little crazy, and then the big villain, he's after some sort of device, and then the heroes like escape with the device, and there's the big push in on Frank Langella as Skeletor being like, no, you must find them, and then he sends out a bunch of various henchmen to go and retrieve the device from them. And I was just thinking that this is every time Marvel has tried to do like a sci-fi superhero thing, it's always resembled this kind of thing beat for beat, especially with them going to Earth and everything too.
There would be more of Courtney Cox's character going, okay, when I don't know, He-Man says something about his sword or whatever.
Yeah, this was pretty much Thor. It's kind of what the storyline in Thor is. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's some decently impressive parts that I like the part where Skeletor is kind of like a giant head in it's like holographic or something, and he's kind of announcing to the entire world that he's taking over it and all that kind of stuff. Some of those fantasy elements I thought were good, but the thing is, the obvious comparison I think is Conan the Barbarian and Flash Gordon, and I think why those work so well is because they focus on the place that these people are from, or at the very least with Flash Gordon, he goes from Earth to a space setting. So you have all these different planets and ecosystems and people, and it's just more interesting. I found it, as soon as they went to Earth, I was kind of disappointed because I wanted to dive in more into the Grayskull setting and just more things like that. I just find it more interesting in these fantasy movies.
And not to mention, same within Flash Gordon, where they got a sort of a classically trained actor to play this goofy villain, where they got Max von Sydow and that. Frank Langella is the one going the hardest in this movie.
Oh, he's going hard.
I thought the whole kind of banging of his staff thing had extreme theater kid energy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you can tell that he's a trained actor, and the way that he goes, he gives all kinds of big monologues where he's like, madness and my destitution and shame and scorn, and it's very you can tell that he was like the actor on set who was doing something, so they just pointed the cameras at him. And they were like, all right,
Gotta say though,
he's the only one with like a close-up monologue, and there's a couple. I gotta say
though, his mask looks like shit.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's so bad. It's literally a Halloween mask that's been glued onto his face.
That's kind of the problem with some of his close-ups, because once again, he's the only one with like important monologues, but they do the close-ups on him, and he has the makeup, and like from afar, it's not too bad. I think it's kind of cool, but as soon as they start zooming into his face, you're like, oh, I literally see the mask like falling off of your lip and shit like that. So
yeah, that's just that canon thing. It's just, you know, they cut it where they chose to cut corners for budget is always just very strange sometimes, but it's because they just shouldn't have been making movies of, you know, this size, you know, kind of like in the first place. And you know, I don't know. I would say that some of the costuming like isn't terrible. Like some of his.
I think Dolph looks good.
Some of his henchmen and stuff like that, you know, aren't like terribly designed or anything. But everything that's surrounding them is just so kind of like lazily derivative.
Like Courtney and her boyfriend's character.
Yeah, that guy, he had his name's Kevin Corrigan, by the way, the character, at least.
Right, Kevin.
Oh, thank you. I might have needed that. same
as the star of Grounded for Life. But yeah, and he had real Chris Mulkey vibes, I found. But I will say on the note of the armor looking cheap, but it is sort of interesting when stuff like this sort of, it looks heavy, like you can tell everyone looks visibly uncomfortable wearing it. And then also there's so many scenes that are just in broad daylight where they're just, you know, kind of skulking around. And it's like, wow, you're really willing to just let this look like shit.
Like completely out of place, yeah. There are a lot of those images.
Yeah, and the broad sort of like, for anyone who hasn't seen Masters of the Universe, the very broad story here is that there's this little creature named Gwildor, who is some small little locksmith / inventor who has made this thing called like the Cosmic Key, which is like some sort of gravitational teleportation device.
Yeah.
And the guy, Skeletor, wants to get it, or he has one already. I was a little confused about this. He wants to get it.
I think he has a bunch of them, and this is the last one that he needs to like have the full power or something like that.
Right. So no one can use it against him or anything like that. And and you know, so they do a little bit of like the matte painting fantasy elements, like a little bit in Krull. Nothing quite as interesting as like the full, like almost like Lord of the Rings thing they did in that film with like the Spider Queen and stuff like that. I was really surprised they didn't. Yeah. I was really surprised they didn't go, you know, like quite that far with it. The closest this gets to like a swamp is like when they land on Earth and Gwildor's like shooting water out of his ears, and he's supposed to be like a goofy character for kids or whatever. But apparently there was just no good reaction from anyone to this film. Apparently at test screenings, kids found the movie kind of like scary or like overly violent a little bit, like kind of like done in that kind of like canon way where they're doing like full shootout set pieces and stuff like that, but like they're doing them in real settings. It's not in like that Star Wars way.
Yeah.
And then obviously adults just thought that this was just awful.
It was silly. Yeah.
Do you think any like just like 20-year-olds on a date went to see this when it came out?
I can't imagine what that would have been like.
Must
have been just a very deflating experience.
Yeah. I mean, also, can you...
I was just going to say that I did read that there was a cult following now, and I was curious as to when that started. I wonder, like, when that picked up, when people started.
That has to be like a Gen Xer thing.
When the children, all the children turned 40 and their midlife crisis started, the cult formed, and they started doing their, you know, YouTube videos of them doing soy face and wearing the He-Man shirt and like talking about how it's cuckoo banana nuts or whatever.
Yeah, like I have the power. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like literally this entire movie is they escape with the teleportation device to Earth, and then a bunch of the Earth characters are like, whoa, isn't it weird that there's like fantasy stuff going on? Crazy. Yeah. And Skeletor just trying to get it back and eventually like coming to Earth and trying to like capture, you know, He-Man and his crew and everything like that. And yeah, it does feel like this, like they spent all of the money on that big set, and then they spend like literally an hour and 20 minutes of this film hanging out in like dingy LA apartments and like alleys.
Yeah. And another thing I find confusing is it seems to want to focus on Courtney Cox as like the waitress that's kind of down on her luck, and she gets in this wacky adventure and all that.
She's also an orphan whose parents died in a plane crash, and her boyfriend tries to reassure her in the weirdest way possible, which was like, you know, planes crash, you know, like.
Yeah, he was not the most comforting person in that scene. They visit her parents' grave, and it's just like the boyfriend does not seem like the best talker. But,
no, and he's a musician who he's the one who gets the device, and he's intrigued by how it opens up portals via
melodies,
tones and keys and songs.
Yes,
yes.
And I find it weird though that we focus on Courtney for so long, and then by the end of the last half of the movie, she's just asleep and like knocked out, and Kevin ends up doing all of the work. And it's just strange because they set it up through the script like she's going to be more of the like Earth protagonist, and then she just takes a total backseat.
Don't you think it's interesting she doesn't really have a romance with He-Man either? Like if it were made today, she would be the He-Man love interest, but I feel like they weren't confident enough in like Dolph's English that they didn't really want to give him they didn't want to give him a love interest.
Yeah, I can see that too. Well, the whole film feels like they have taken away a lot that Dolph should be doing because of their lack of faith in him. And that's just the feeling I got. There's honestly very few scenes of him really doing much, and it's strange. I didn't expect that.
No, all the lines are given to the Earth characters, or a lot of them are given to like his team, which is just like generic soldier guy, and then generic soldier guy's daughter, who her big moment is becoming generic soldier girl. In a really great moment where she literally looks at the camera and is just like, yeah, that's right, you need a woman's touch in this fight scene.
Right, yeah.
Which is at the big music store shootout, which is just I don't think that there's a single set piece in this that kind of like registered for me, weirdly enough. I was kind of hoping there would be something that kind of worked, but as Ethan said, like again, it's a music store and like a gymnasium, and like the aliens crash and they throw a janitor around a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a little bit where he gets into like a sword fight in like an alley with some of them. With some of like the creature characters. I can't remember their names, but there's like 4 of them, and they're just Skeletor's underlings. The underlings that are not Evil Lynn, which her name's just Evelyn, but they call her Evelyn.
Oh, I didn't even realize that until right now. You just said that.
Yeah, and I at first I was like, are they just mispronouncing this? And then I should have looked it up. Maybe the character in the show is just called Evil Lynn. I don't know, but yeah, that's what they just say the entire time. And
I didn't mind the when like the portal opens and they start to come to Earth. There's like this big red portal that opens, and then they're on like some of them are kind of flying on these hover boards, like hover skateboards almost, in order to get them. Like there's a couple little small campy things. It's just never enough to really be all that exciting or intriguing.
I feel like there should have been a moment with Dolph riding that hoverboard or wherever where he's like, it is Swedish accent, like, we or whatever, I don't know. Like, you'd think there would be that.
Yeah, even in like Flash Gordon, they get to that point where he's riding that flying ski-doo basically in space. Like it needed something like that, I feel like.
Yeah, because they do the bit where he at some point he gets on one of their hover bikes and he starts like chasing them around, but it's so very clear that he's been comped into frames that he's not a part of. So Dolph wasn't even like given the chance to like act against anything.
Yeah.
Like it was this weird thing where like you see him comped in like flying around on the streets, and then you see all the other actors in the shot that they actually shot on location like pointing at him and being like, hey, it's He-Man.
Do we know if this is like a Dolph project that he wanted to be a part of, or was this more like, we're going to pay you a shit ton of money and this is the big thing that's going to break you out? Was this something...
I know... Sorry, I know at least that Dolph has spoken very poorly of this film since.
Okay.
And when the sequel was announced, I think before this came out, obviously, he was going to be replaced by like a professional surfer or something.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing, like about this is that I wouldn't, people I think use this film to kind of, maintain their assessment as Dolph as kind of like this guy who got hired as the B-movie schlock version of Arnold or Stallone if you couldn't afford those guys. And it's really unfortunate that that's kind of what his reputation has been for a lot of people in pop culture. Like anytime I've like mentioned his movies to people, that's a lot of time the reaction you kind of get.
Yeah.
And it really undervalues him as like an actual performer. And unfortunately, this isn't necessarily the best movie for that, but I don't think it's his fault. I think he's not given anything to do. He doesn't seem particularly confident in the film.
Well, that's the thing. I was watching it and I was going like, well, where's the scene at least where he gets his chance, right? To kind of do some type of monologue or significant character moment.
We were talking about Rocky. We were talking about Rocky IV last week, and like he has incredible physical screen presence.
Yeah, and he says like 5 lines.
Imposing figure, and he delivers the lines well.
Oh yeah,
and so it's this weird thing where like he carried himself very well physically in that film, and you can tell that Stallone just kind of really knew how to use him. And I mean, even the movie that he did that came out the same year as this, Red Scorpion, which is a genuinely kind of evil movie where he's basically like Rambo, but he's fighting for the South African apartheid government who secretly funded that film and everything. But he looks and acts like an action star in that film. He absolutely carries himself well in that movie, and you can tell in this that he's embarrassed to be playing a toy, and whatever they recreated for him on set, it doesn't really work.
If I had a PhD in biochemical engineering or whatever, I'd be pretty ashamed to be playing an action figure.
I mean that's one thing we haven't mentioned. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just meant like especially something like of this caliber and what they really gave him as a character. I would definitely feel as Dolph like shit. This was not the move.
Yeah, because we haven't mentioned it. We mentioned it on the Rocky episode for people last week. But like, the dude's got a master's in chemical engineering. The dude is
very intelligent.
He is like an actual trained karate fighter. He only has a movie career because Grace Jones saw him in a club in Sydney, Australia, and was like, damn, that guy's really big and handsome. He should be my bodyguard. And that got him a cameo role when she was in the Bond film A View to Kill. Right. So like this is the only reason he got in, and then he liked it so much he was like, yeah, dude, I'm gonna stick around. I'm gonna try modeling and acting and kind of see how that goes. And that was how he was able to send his photo and video and auditions to Sylvester Stallone. He got into Rocky, and now he's playing this giant toy next to a little dwarf, and there's a key, and I think he even said in the Canon documentary that he felt stupid making this movie.
And I feel like even his small line deliveries, you kind of feel that a little bit, like you kind of sense a little bit of embarrassment as opposed to the later things that we'll discuss.
He's there like 90% naked next to like a little dwarf man who's like, there's only 0.1 chromons till moonrise, sir.
And then you put him in the middle of LA. Like you couldn't even give him the setting where that would be appropriate. You have to throw him on the LA streets.
Yeah.
So
and not to mention, again, all of this is just so derivative of so many other films that we've already mentioned too. Like it's just it's Flash Gordon, it's Star Wars, it's Beastmaster, it's Krull, it's Conan, and every single thing that any one of those films did, this film just kind of just does it again, but a little bit worse.
Yeah,
a little bit chintzier, a little bit less well acted. In sort of. By all the supporting characters and everything.
Yeah, one of Dolph's most significant moments is when, like, I think it's the whole He-Man catchphrase, which is the "I have the power" or whatever. And I think it's pretty obviously like ADR. I don't think they got Dolph to do that. It sounded like they got it straight from the cartoon and just put it in the scene. And so even that big moment that's like He-Man's moment, I don't think Dolph even really got that. So there's something there too.
Damn. Canon.
That's what it sounded like. I could be wrong, but it didn't sound like Dolph doing it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Canon's production practices.
Yeah.
What was the goblin's name? The little dwarf guy's name again?
Gwildor.
I thought it was interesting. You guys have seen Ridley Scott's Legend, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I watched it again recently. I thought it was interesting in that film, the kind of like the goblins and gnomes and hobgoblins or whatever in that movie. How they're all they probably were these very state of the art like animatronics, but and they're in sort of this like odd in between point of like gnomes in movies where it was like the Ewoks. So you just have a person in a suit, then you have these animatronics, but they're still in this midpoint where they look absolutely horrific. It's like actually tough to like watch them on screen because they're so creepy.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting watching something like this where clearly they saw that and like, okay, that looks like shit. And then there's like just go straight back to like, you know, a small actor in a costume.
Yeah, there's even parts with Wildor where like it seems very uncomfortable for whoever that actor was, because the face mask at one point, the only thing that's open, he has his one eye completely shut closed because of something that happens to him, and then there's only that one eye he has, and I just couldn't imagine how uncomfortable that must have been to just have your basically like 95% of your face covered in that, and then you can't even see clearly as well. So I imagine that guy had quite a time.
Yeah, well, and then not to mention that the guys who were in the other costumes, they're in like similarly, you know, they're in like monster costumes, and they're named like Blade and Beastman and
some of those are
Karg.
cool. I thought though, like I liked the bounty hunter with the kind of frog throat that would inhale and exhale like a bubble. I thought that was kind of cool. The designs of the bounty hunters weren't bad, but it is like directly from Empire Strikes Back. But the designs were there,
and then they don't get anything to do other than like this really terrible sword fight that he has with the one that's like part robot. I couldn't make out like any of the choreography that they were doing at all with Dolph until Dolph like takes one of
the way that
he takes
they
one
do
of the
coverage.
small aliens and he throws it at one of the larger aliens, and I was like, okay, there's a beat. I understood what.
The coverage of action is quite confusing in this. I will say, like it's very disorienting, and it's a lot of unfocused shots of them doing the action, and then kind of quicker cuts. It's nothing like Taken 2 or anything like that, but you know they're too quick, and there's not enough clarity on the action sequences.
Well, and they clearly just didn't have any. I mean, I think the larger issue is that they didn't have any choreography really.
Sure,
I don't even think they knew what to shoot when it
to
came
go,
time to. Like that music store set piece. That was when it really lost me. Was when I was like, okay, so they've set up a lot of plot elements that like the humans think that this teleportation device is like an instrument. So he takes it to like his buddy at the music store, and so they do all of this to set up that the cop and the kid and the device and the guy who owns the music store are all in one place by the time that Courtney Cox, who gets saved by He-Man from the gymnasium set piece, they all meet up at the music store where, Skeletor's sorceress Evelyn and, various other sort of Darth Vader looking, soldiers with blasters come in, and they literally are just firing, like blaster shots at each other. And the big dramatic, like slow motion destruction moment that you see in a lot of 80s action, it's like a keyboard falling over.
Yeah.
And around that time was when I was like, okay, so this is it. This is the movie. There's nothing more. We're not gonna. If we go back to the big fantasy thing, which they do eventually, but it's worth noting, Globus and Golem, they initially shut them down, and they didn't have that big final sword fight between him and Skeletor. They
Really?
had the director had to beg to get them to shoot that so that they had an ending. I have no idea what they had.
That's so weird. You'd think, like, because when I saw that, I went, well, this is the logical conclusion of where this is going to lead. Obviously, Skeletor and He-Man are going to battle it out. That's crazy.
You would think.
Yeah. That seems like that's the most cliche beat that could have been possible. I'm shocked that they'd be like, that's not the move. That's not our move.
Did they blow all the budget on Skeletor going into pimp mode at the end with the?
That's
Gold
I'm guessing. I'm guessing that has to be that has to be part of it.
And
I mean,
him,
to be fair, he's looking pretty good.
And
He's
he
got some
quotes
drip going
he
on.
quotes Kanye there. I am a god.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is. Like there's one set piece where Skeletor comes down to Earth and he's on his big ship and he's like hovering over like the California streets, and I thought that would be pretty cool until they kept cutting to the shots just pointing up at him where they wouldn't show you the streets anymore. Like they did one wide shot of it that I was like, okay, I see he's on a ship, he's floating around, it's kind of cool, and then the rest of the shots make him look like he's on like a parade float.
Yeah, the parade float made me. I kind of liked it because it is funny and totally silly. I mean, it's not intimidating at all. But just the image of this like big skeleton king from space coming to Earth and then having like a parade for himself, I kind of found amusing. But it is silly. It is absolutely absurd.
Well, yeah, and he's just being dragged around doing like purple force lightning on like Courtney Cox and stuff like that, which again they're also stealing from Star
Sidious.
Wars. Which then obviously Ethan already mentioned they throw him down the shaft, but not only do they throw him down the shaft when he's in like his full golden gear that he's got and he does the big sword fight with He-Man. It's the only sequence in the film that has kind of like a sense of mood to the lighting. It's all done in kind of like this really dark void shadows where like they do these bright like blue and red neon colors with like a little bit of fog in there while they're fighting, and it's like these close-ups of their faces while they're swinging their swords around. And I was sitting there going, that's just the fucking same fight from Empire Strikes Back.
It is. And also what I found hilarious, this little detail, you can see. Like, I think they kind of did it on purpose. They must have been like, well, it's a spaceship, so it would have lights, no problem. But it's weird because that blue and red light that keeps fading in and out between the colors, you can just see it in the background of the set. So it feels like you can see this, like the actual lighting of the set. And it didn't mesh with me. It didn't make me feel like it was part of the ship lighting the scene. It felt like I'm just seeing the boom mic or something. I don't know if you felt the same way, but that lighting felt too artificial in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that ultimately it's I was experiencing just like major zone out by the end of this film.
A little bit, yeah.
I was. It was my first time watching it, and I expected to get a little bit more out of it because we've talked about a lot of movies like these before, and we've always found kind of something a little bit of value in most of them. But this made me wonder if I was a little harsh on Beastmaster. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that this movie lined up with how I felt about Beastmaster more than any of the other kind of space fantasies that we've done. But I think I did get more out of Beastmaster than this. So yeah, it did make me want to revisit it a little bit.
But Beastmaster, at least the dude is like weirdly horny, and
it's got
Rip
boobs
Torn
in
is like
Beastmaster.
is like really he really gets to go off the rails like as a villain, whereas Frank Langella, you feel like Frank Langella's going for that in his performance, but he's not doing much of anything. He's just kind of yelling, which is fine.
I think he's decent though. I think he did the best he could, honestly.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people working on this film probably felt in a similar place.
I'll say my real last thought on this movie is that I do genuinely mean this. That I think the ending with Courtney Cox's parents coming back to life sends a terrible message to children.
They're not coming back.
And what
well, it's, I think children need to learn that, children need to learn about loss and that, magical keys do not bring back your dead parents.
He-Man will not save your folks.
I did find that very funny that like the boyfriend in the early scenes is just like, sometimes they die. Sometimes planes crash. There's not much, there's nothing that you can do about it. And then He-Man tells her, there is stuff that you can do. You can come through this portal and you can watch me swing the sword at the skeleton guy. And then we say goodbye. And things are better now.
Like, not to get too dark, but there probably was at least one kid there who's like, dad died of cancer and he was 6, and he was like, but I'll get the key and he'll come back.
No. That is a very dark thought. Yeah, very dark.
Sorry for planting that.
Oh, that's good. It's a good way to end her.
That's totally okay. Because I think we have to pivot towards reductive rating round on this, which for you, Ethan, remove all the words, all the nuance, reduce the movie between a number between 1 and 5, and this has been kind of a scattershot segment because I just don't have a whole lot of things to say about this one, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. It kind of sucks that this was Dolph's first leading role. I feel like this painted a lot of people's perception of Dolph,
and I don't think it's really Dolph's fault, which is a big bummer too.
Which is unfortunate because I'm a lot more excited to branch off and talk about Punisher, which I think Dolph does some actually gets to do some interesting things, and the filmmaking in general is just on a higher caliber. But yeah, for me this overall just too lazily derivative, and unlike the next film we're going to be talking about, not well made or realized enough to kind of like justify that, because I won't go as far as to say that the Punisher is like it's aiming for a similar territory where it's aiming to give Dolph a leading role in a geek property to try and cash in on repurposing a toy or a comic into a kind of genre movie that already exists, right? I just think that this one was not very successful at doing that. I would love to see a Dolph do a Conan style film that was actually as good as Conan was. Hell yeah! But unfortunately, not many people out there. No matter how much cocaine you did, you just you can't reach that unhinged craziness that a screenplay written by Oliver Stone gets you to. Yep.
You need more coke.
Yeah. Yep.
But I'd give it a 2 out of 5.
Oh, I didn't even say this one's gonna get a low. This one's gonna get a low 2 for me.
Okay, I would give it still a solid. I wasn't close to hating this movie. I did see through it a lot, and I felt like a lot of the stuff that they did was kind of lazily put together, very derivative. I do like the Grayskull set, and I did like how Skeletor, he really gives it in his performance, as much as the mask is a little shaky. But it's he's really the only one that's giving this kind of over-the-top comical performance, and I think that it at least helps the film stay interesting in the parts in between the Earth segments that are quite boring, I think. I wish they kept with the setting of Grayskull and that area. I just think once they got to Earth, it was really dull and just very uninteresting. Very derivative characters with Courtney Cox and Kevin, so that didn't help. And yeah, so just too lazy in too many parts. So 2 out of 5 for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, did you also notice that the opening credits, they literally just sound like they lifted the Superman theme?
Oh yeah, I did notice that. Yeah.
And did the exact same opening credits of the original Superman film.
Yeah, the first 3 notes in the melody are dun 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 dun, and then it changes from there. And you're like, are we going into Superman? And then it kind of does a change, but yeah, it's funny that even that is derivative. You just see so many things that are being blatantly stolen from other films, and not in this charming intriguing way.
Done worse, and then chinsily realized very cynically, because clearly these two. These two guys, Golem and Globus, who ran Canon, these two Israeli producers, were just we are big action Warner Brother film now.
Yeah, yeah,
that's what it kind of feels like.
And it also feels like they're just kind of almost insulting Dolph. They're not taking him seriously. They're not really giving him a chance as a performer in this film, and that also left a sour taste in my mouth. So,
for you, Ethan.
There's that part of me that thinks about, surveillance footage of the press screening of this, 10 a.m. in that New York screening room, the whole bourgeois critic class of Janet Maslin and Gene Shalit just lying there, taking their notes and loudly sighing throughout this movie for children. And that part of me, wants to give it a pass, but I have to kind of side with them on this. But also, I got to give it some points because we should mention the abandoned sequel for this movie. The sets and costumes built and designed for it were later reused for Albert Puyen's Cyborg, which is a good movie.
Oh yeah,
hell yeah!
So,
we mentioned that on our Cyborg episode, but yeah, that's awesome.
So
at least it led to something good.
Yeah, so you know what? I'll give it a 2. I didn't have much positive to say, but I don't really hold this movie in any real contempt.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right there with you. And yeah, I am charmed by it, knowing that it directly resulted in Cyborg, which is a really fun film. And we covered Nemesis and Cyborg over on the Patreon for anyone who hasn't heard that. But like, that's Jean-Claude Van Damme in these kind of outfits. In the split kicking of a viral apocalypse, that's what this movie needed ultimately.
Yeah, more split kicks for sure.
All right, well that will, I think, wrap it up for Masters of the Universe. Stick around because we are going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about, I think, something that flexes Dolph's credibility a little bit more as an actor.
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about The Punisher.
He defends the innocent. But if you're guilty, he gives no warning and shows no mercy.
What the hell is this? Trouble.
Dolph Lundgren, Louis Gossett Jr.
Mr. P, happy hunting.
The Punisher. Justice with a vengeance.
All right, we are back, and we are talking The Punisher, the 1989 American action film directed by Mark Goldblatt and written by Boaz Yakin. I don't know why I recognize that name.
I recognize that name.
He did From Dusk Till Dawn 2, Blood Money.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Actually, let me
How is that?
I have not seen it. I just remember seeing that name in the Movie Hound or the Video Hound guide.
Okay. So he wrote that film. He didn't direct it, but he wrote it.
Dude, he also wrote the Prince of Persia movie and Now You See Me.
King.
Amazing.
Let's go, man.
Amazing.
This is how you start a career, right here.
Yep. He directed Safe too with Jason Statham. Anyway.
And Uptown Girls with Brittany Murphy.
Oh yeah.
And Remember the Titans. Wow.
Okay.
Damn.
Guys had a
executive producer for the first 2 entries of the Hostel franchise as well.
Yeah, this guy's gotten around.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, the Punisher, I'm sure most people are familiar with the character of Frank Castle, who is a sort of veteran cop whose entire family is murdered by the mafia. In various stories, it's kind of different. They're murdered. Sort of like what happens in the Travolta one? They just get shot like at a wedding or something, right?
I actually don't remember the Travolta one very well.
And in this one, they're killed by a car bomb. But one thing that I'll say about this, like right off the top, is I love how streamlined this movie is.
Absolutely.
That they cover all of the stuff about his past, other than brief flashbacks, in like this like weirdly kind of like noirish Saul Bass like opening credits, which is just like the grainy sewer that he lives in, like superimposed with images of criminals and martial arts training and like
the colorful
gangsters.
Moving target thing that it kind of does.
It's laying out that he's been killing off various gangsters because he's killed off like 125 mob related figures before the movie's like even started. And it's laying that out in like the opening credits scene, which is just kind of like a really cool way to kind of bypass the origin story and like the opening 20 minutes of setup that you would need and just doing cool vibes, cool images, and just Dolph just blowing up the credit sequence with like machine gun fire and like this pop art montage. It's just like a weird thing to do, but I was very impressed by that, especially that this is on a very limited budget. It's produced by New World Pictures. which was a Roger Corman company that he founded in the 70s. And they've made a lot of movies that we've talked about, you know, like The Brood, Death Race 2000, Larry Cohen's God Told Me To,
Nice.
Crimes of Passion, some of the early Cronenbergs and stuff too. And of course, they also did the other Mark Goldblatt, did Dead Heat, which is a movie that's a total blast, and I can't recommend more people checking it out. We talked about it with Andrew Law probably like 2 years ago now, maybe.
Yeah,
but it's just a total blast combination of like Shane Black buddy comedy movie and like straight up like zombie body horror movie.
It's perfect. Really good.
And I will never forget the two zombies with Uzis just shooting into each other like, you know, 80s action movie style, just laying into each other, flesh ripping off of each other's bones while they're shredding each other with the Uzis, but neither going down because they're both dead.
Yeah, incredible.
Just like great little things like that only Mark Goldblatt, you know, would think to do, because, you know, he's just so well versed in putting together, you know, like these action films. Again, this is the guy who edited Terminator, First Blood Part 2, Commando, True Lies, Showgirls, Starship Troopers, Last Boy Scout, Bad Boys 2. And yeah, so watching him take a stab at like a comic book movie, but like a comic book movie that still somehow like more resembles like a hyper violent crime gangster movie with like the kind of unhinged violence you'd see in like a, I don't know, like a Seagal, like On Deadly Ground or Out for Justice,
like Death Wish or something.
Yeah, like that's what I found myself thinking, like, okay, so this is sort of like 90s geek adaptation where all the gangsters are in like pinstripe suits and the Punisher hangs out in like a Ninja Turtles sewer base. But also it's a grindhouse revenge movie pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
So
and also you get
and a
to see
Yakuza movie.
And you get to see Dolph's ass.
Yeah. There's a great tracking shot through the sewer that arrives at Dolph's just naked body, praying at some sort of vigil of candles that he sets up that he has in the sewers.
Yeah, and I love his like talks. Like he's not sure if he's talking to God or not. It's like, God hasn't answered me yet, and all that like really dark kind of macho poetry.
Well, I think all those lines through his kind of accent have a weird poetry. You're right; they have a real I still talk to God sometimes. They all sound like that. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and what's the big thing that he goes? I'm asking why. Why are the innocent dead and the guilty alive? Where is justice?
Undead. I don't know why I sound like Anton Chigurh when I do this, but the guilty will be punished. Yeah.
Yes.
It's so good.
And here is punishment here in me. And I gotta say, this was just such like a... When I watched this for the first time, I was like legitimately kind of like blown away that this, you know, wasn't sort of like more talked about. Because like Mark Goldblatt, because I mean Dead Heat's not really talked about either, and I'm really surprised that some guy who, you know, does such competent action made such like weird little, you know, again it's an incredibly silly like macho revenge action movie where Dolph Lundgren lives in the sewer and everything like that, but like that to me should be like a feature.
Well, as a guy who, you know, spent a lot of time on message boards back in the day, both for movies and comic books, I can say that I feel like this is the kind of movie that back then where people would be like, "Oh, it's bad because the Punisher doesn't have his skull on his shirt or whatever." Case closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see that, but for some reason that really was enough for people to like not be able to appreciate like Dolph Lundgren, you know, doing this very macho poetry, riding around a motorcycle through the sewers in like head to toe black leather, occasionally coming out of the sewers to basically just brutally execute various Italian mobsters and like ninjas wearing scuba gear and things like this. That's basically, you know, what the vast majority of this movie is.
Some of the violence
I gotta say, I had a blast.
Pretty wild too. Like I like the at one point the Yakuza are taking over like a ship full of Frenchmen, and they start throwing these balls that are spiked just at their faces, and they just get stuck in their forehead, and you know they fall over dead. It's got a pretty visceral feeling to some of the action in it. lot of squib work, a lot of like blood splatter effects as well.
Well, that's what I mean. Like it more closely reminds me of, like, I was sitting here thinking of some of the action scenes. I was thinking of something like Out for Justice, like where you get a shot where, you know, Steven Seagal will just like pin a dude's arm to, you know, the meat shop wall with a butcher's knife. And like you actually see it like take a chunk of his hand off or something like that. Like it's very weird seeing that here in like what is, you know, again, still overtly, you know, sometimes kind of a silly, you know, comic book movie in its own way. I wouldn't say that it's any more stupidly plotted than half the comic book movies that come out, but for me, this is just more what like a real movie is supposed to look like.
Yeah,
Definitely.
No, I will say, to me, it didn't. It's less. It reminded me of existing action movies, and more reminded me of the film within, or the fake McBain movies from The Simpsons. It felt like the closest I've seen to that in live action.
Yeah, I could agree with that for sure.
Yeah, like or Raw Deal.
Yeah.
with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
This one does have more of like a darker, serious tone. They definitely take Frank seriously as a character. They still know what they're getting into with some of the like over the top action that comes from the 90s and all that stuff. But I do like that they take his kind of dark motivations seriously. So that's
oh yeah,
cool.
I mean he really unleashes like gruesome violence in this film, and the film takes that as like, you know, like a serious thing. Like weirdly enough, instead of focusing a lot of the time on him, a good portion of the film is spent with, you know, like his partner, Louis Gossett Jr. playing a detective named Jake Berkowitz, who you know, is his former partner, and you know, he's the only cop in town who thinks that Frank Castle is the guy doing this, because everyone else thinks that, you know, Frank Castle, he died in the, you know, the mob bombing with his family, and he's just gone. But really, you know, he's moved underground and he's decided on this revenge mission. And as this movie started, he's again already killed 125 people, like massacred them.
Yeah.
And you know, like he does some, like one of the opening bits in this is like one of the Italian gangsters like getting off in court. He's the Dapper Don of the Franco crime family, and he's like, "This is America. If a man is innocent, the system will prevail." Shortly after, Dolph Lundgren, you know, assuming this is the guy who killed his family, breaks into the dude's mansions with his big black boots and his knife. He drops down into what looks like the lady from Shanghai room for a second, and he kicks a blade into the dude's chest. And then he drops a rope down and like hangs another one of his henchmen in front of him, and you just watch the Don come in with his food, and all he sees is, you know, his dead, bleeding henchman on the ground and one like strangled from the roof of his mansion.
They even do this like POV of the Punisher coming up to him when he realizes who's done it, and it's like it's almost implied that the Punisher is, you know, kind of larger than life, an entity that can't be reckoned with. Because the way that the camera approaches him and he kind of lets out a yell, it's almost as if he's like a monster or a serial killer or something like that.
Yeah, which I mean, he is in a way.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, it does feel. It almost does feel like it's some kind of like insane giallo you're watching at the beginning.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I mean, like you get that all from the point of view of him, of the people being massacred. And like the climax of that scene is like the Don with a knife in his back, like walking out his front door while the house is like exploding, and you just see like Dolph Lundgren's like, you know,
inside the house,
black leather silhouette, you know, but you know, just slightly in front of the flames out of the, you know, like the pristine White House. It's a nice little shot, actually.
And he moves like all it does is he moves to the right of the front entrance, and the whole house explodes. So it does once again give this kind of like he's someone that can't really be fought, because like he just he's inside the house and then it explodes 2 seconds later. There's no sequence where he like gets out of the house. They play a lot of like he's a mysterious guy that can go in and out of scenes without any trouble, that kind of thing. So I like that too.
And then a good portion of the film is set up with, again, his partner Louis Gossett Jr. who is the character who is, pursuing him and trying to bring him to justice in some way, even though no one else believes him or wants to believe him. Like one of the early scenes is one of his bosses being like, the mayor is breathing down my neck. We can't have the public thinking that there's a psychotic ex-cop out on the street murdering people, and things of this nature.
Yeah.
So it definitely travels, with a little bit of what we're going to be talking about next week when we're talking about Dolph doing some buddy cop stuff. There's a little bit of it's traveling more in that kind of genre.
This is like the movie that happens after those buddy cop stories. It's like the two friends that were cops
really
now
dark,
separated because of some terrible things that have happened, and they're trying to kind of come together and make, well, at least specifically Jake is trying to make Frank realize what he's doing is violent and too much, and he's killed 125 people. He should reckon with that. And yeah, I
actually found because I can't say that I've seen Louis Gossett Jr. like really act much. I can't think of what else I've even seen him in, but like I actually found his character like kind of sad.
Yeah.
The way that he's he's dealing with the fact that his friend died, but then also that his friend is now, basically a slasher killer, and he doesn't like that either. And then also he, briefly mentions like his alcoholism, which is like a thing that recurs in this movie, because Dolph also has like a Shakespearean actor turned homeless man who is like his one partner.
And he talks in rhymes.
Who helps him navigate the underworld. There's a scene where he lures that man with an RC car with a bottle of Jameson on it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, so there's some funny stuff and some genuinely kind of like sad stuff that's taking place.
And even that mood though, like where it's funny to watch him bring whiskey on an RC car, there is still like a sadness to the fact that this guy is so desperate for booze, he's willing to
he's baiting a homeless man with alcohol.
Even when they throw that kind of humor at you, it still works within the tone of the rest of the film, which is something that more so when we talk about the buddy cop movies that we're going to be doing next week, sometimes the balance isn't as good. Still there, but this one I found really stayed true to its tone most of the time.
Well, something I find interesting with this film is that it's kind of... Well, it's interesting because the Punisher now is such a loaded character in terms of, like, literally cops will wear, like, the Punisher logo on their, like, gear and stuff.
Yeah,
and,
right.
I was kind of watching this again, I was thinking, how will this be reflective of the anxieties of its time? Because I think this was... I didn't remember the movie very well, and I was kind of worried it would be, I don't know, like have a really reactionary bent of being about like inner city violence or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And it does have a reactionary bent, but it's the reactionary bent it's specific to is the fear of the Japanese takeover with the villains of the time. Because this is something you see in a lot of films. And this, to be specific, this was how this, kind of the end of history period when people feared that Japan was going to have a total economic domination over America. And you see this represented in movies, as varied as Blind Date, the Blake Edwards romantic comedy, or best seen, I don't know if you guys have seen this, and if you haven't, you must do it for the show, Charles Bronson in Kinajit, Forbidden Subjects.
I have not. What the hell is that?
Yeah, I'm watch-listing that.
A movie where all the Japanese businessmen coming to America are secretly sex creeps. And it's up to Charles Bronson to lock them up. You should definitely do it on the show.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah, you see that represented in this with the Japanese being the ultimate big bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. And we're going to be talking about it a little bit next week too, because Dolph did another film, Showdown in Little Tokyo, with Brandon Lee, which is also about the Yakuza, like entering the drug scene.
Something that I like about how they portray the Yakuza in this is that scene where I think it's their introduction to the mafia with the Yakuza, and she comes in and says like, "You Americans are so like." I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's like you're talented at violence, but you're also reckless and unfocused. And and it kind of leads into the whole idea of like the Yakuza taking over that the overall mafia in the streets and that kind of thing. I did like their introduction. I thought it was pretty good.
And there's some stuff relevant to now in terms of there's that scene called The Kidnapped Children, where they're clearly in what seems like the basement of Comet Pizza.
Yeah.
They do kidnap all the mobsters' children at one point in the film. I kind of like too that there were so many different kinds of mobsters in this movie. One of the big first action scenes in the film is Dolph interrupting a drug deal at a you know, like a loading dock kind of deal, and he goes in and it looks like there's a bunch of Italian dudes and they're all just being like, hey, what? And they literally saying shit like that, like before they get killed, obviously.
Yeah, like one I like is where he's like, no, it's completely dead out here. And then he just gets popped in the head.
Well, yeah, because one, it's like literally the guy's calling in being like, hey, have you seen anything? Is anything going wrong? Is everything good? And he's like, what? He's like, is everything good? He's like, yeah. And then literally a katana flies through the windshield and kills him.
Good stuff.
And meanwhile, a bunch of like the French dudes are, you know, doing, you know, bringing in the drugs, and then the Yakuza are intercepting that and killing a bunch of the dudes, which Jamie mentioned, like, you know, they pull out like hidden blades out of like their shoes.
There's a lot of that in this movie.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, a lot of hidden swords and just weaponry in general. That's where also they have the ball spikes, which are pretty effective. I like the use of those a lot.
Someone also gets like their arm chopped off in that sequence.
Yep.
And so you have the French versus the Italians versus the Japanese all meeting. And then Dolph shows into this. And he literally like harpoons a dude with a rope attached to it. And while it's pierced through the van, he slides down it and starts firing machine gun fire into the various Yakuza and Italian goons. He lands and then switches to a shotgun somehow. And then he starts like sending people like doing full wire pulls with squibs exploding everywhere as they go flying.
I also
was
really like
going, this is a comic book movie. It's so strange.
Oh yeah, dude. And I also really like the sequence where he goes down the rope and then he's starting to shoot everybody and he starts to run and the camera follows him like a tracking shot sideways and it goes between all these like platforms, so it'll be like him running and shooting somebody and then the platform and then him shooting again and him the platform, and it was a very cool and exciting shot for that kind of shooting and chase sequence. So that sequence is really good.
Yeah, I think Goldblatt, you know, just has a you know, a really good eye for, you know, the kind of tangible action and stunt work in that, having cut so much of it together. Yeah, and there's a lot of, you know, really decent like steady cam moves, and eventually in the big like final set piece in the corporate offices, there's like this like Dutch angles and like this blood red lighting that's still kind of like following the actual fights that are taking place. Like the fights are pretty good. Once again, this is another movie where Dolph basically fought everyone for real because this is just a thing he likes to do. He likes to tell all the stunt people he works with that, yeah, we're just gonna fucking hit each other. And they didn't. Well, and the thing about this too is
actually, that's awesome.
He didn't for this one. They didn't grab stunt guys. They actually trained karate champions. So all the people that he fights in like the big set pieces, including like the Coney Island one and stuff like that as well, are him just fighting actual karate champions.
Oh, that's cool. That brings up something interesting because we talked about Seagal and how he would also kind of like hit people on purpose.
Yeah, but he just wouldn't tell people.
Right. That's basically what I was going to say. I'm assuming the difference there is that they agreed with Dolph that like we're going to smack each other around a little bit to make it look really powerful, impactful.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's just like that seems wild to me that that's the way they did it, just because I thought that it was kind of against what they did as stuntmen a lot of the time. They try to...
No, for some reason, ever since Rocky IV, I guess because Stallone directed him to really hit him, it's just like, always been a thing that Dolph's just, he's brought it up a lot. It's just he likes adding that realistic factor to the fight scenes. Even in a movie where,
everyone's in agreement,
you know,
that's killer.
And as a result, he basically starts he starts a mob war between all of these different factions, and he reveals that was actually kind of his plan. That he wanted to just quietly sneak in and get them all to look like they were fucking each other up, right. And get them to all kill each other. But unfortunately, it has left the Italian mob so weak that the Yakuza is, strong enough that they can take over. And as a show of force, they kidnap all of the the Italian mobsters' kids.
Right.
And then, that is something that Dolph eventually has to reckon with, because he has the characters being like, now you're going to get, a bunch of these little innocent kids, essentially killed. And the reason you started doing this was because your kids were killed. So they try to appeal to his humanity, even though Dolph is doing a very effective dead-eyed stare baritone voice riding a motorcycle through the sewers. He's doing something kind of I would say kind of inhuman a little bit. He has that quality. He has a killing machine quality that he would like repurpose in kind of like the Universal Soldier films. Yeah, especially the late Universal Soldier films. I think Andrew Levine, listener of the show, brought up that he was very excited we were talking about Punishers because it reminded, the kind of beyond humanity, kind of like raging at humanity, reminded him as a precursor to kind of like the John Hyams Universal Soldier films that he's did in 2009 and 2012, which are awesome if anyone hasn't seen those.
Yeah, I think this is I don't know if we've said this already, a much better vehicle for Dolph than Masters of the Universe. It shows off his talents much better, I think.
Yeah. I mean, even just as a physical performer, like again, that big Coney Island set piece is kind of ridiculous, where like you see all these like what basically looks like ninja outfit dudes like riding down those like giant slides that you slide down with the mats.
And they're shooting at the same time. Yeah, that shit is awesome. That shit is fantastic. Oddly enough, that kind of reminded me of just that brief sequence in Nemesis where they go down the slide and they're shooting at each other. But this one is a little bit more, I don't know, like gang affiliated, just because they have like 16 people going down the slide at the same time trying to shoot at Dolph. It's some really insane imagery that I liked a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of just like really great, physical stunt work that he gets to do in that. He gets to like do hand-to-hand combat and kicks like on like spinning like I don't even know what didn't understand what that floor wheel was at all. This apparently isn't even in Coney Island. This is like all shot in Australia from what I understand.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah, the spinning thing seemed like something that's completely out of place. I'm not sure what the practical use of it was, but I did like the way that they filmed it, because they kind of have this really long one shot and the cameraman goes around the platform that isn't moving. And so you have, like, you're watching Dolph and the guy kind of scuffle and move along while it's floating, or not floating, but spinning, and it kind of makes Dolph travel a little further than he normally would. And I don't know, it leads to some interesting kind of action beats a little bit, but it does seem like weird and kind of out of place, but but I will say Goldblatt fills it with like, decent roaming camera choreography and stuff like that, hand-to-hand fights, and there's like chains and shotguns and stunts of him being like pulled from like the bike as they use the chain to like hurl him off of it, and being like roundhouse kicked into like unconsciousness and things like that. So it's decently handled by Goldblatt, and definitely brings a sense of like physicality to some of the more ridiculous elements, because some of the elements do get a little crazy, and it kind of helps that there is some sort of filmic grounding, even when you're watching ridiculous action scenes. At least like the action is tangible and held in that way, especially because then you get to scenes where like like I love that they included the child actors in this, but like the innocent kids who they're holding to like put them into the slave trade. Yeah. And they're like, we're here because our dads are rich gangsters. Yeah. And then they start fighting about it like 10-year-olds. I also love that they have a sequence eventually where, the kids get kidnapped or whatever. And then Frank, the Punisher, he steals a bus so that he can grab them and then take take them. And there's a part where the Yakuza start to chase them on the bus, and a guy jumps off of the car that he's in and hangs on to one of the side windows, and the kids end up like hitting his
Peel his
hands.
fingers off, right?
Yeah, so that he lets go. And then there's this shot that's completely unnecessary, but totally I appreciate it. Where the fucking body just gets totally run over by the van, and you see the whole thing get like tossed and turned.
You see that dude's chest get flattened by a car after the kids pried his fingers off the windows.
Yeah, and I love that it's the kids that do it. The only thing that it's missing is a cut back to the kids where they're like high five for murdering a man or something like that. but I love that.
Well, and there's like a Jackie Chan level stunt in that sequence too, where like one of the dudes is riding on top of the roofs of a car that runs into the bus, and he flies off the roof of the car into the windshield of the bus through it, and then starts trying to fight Dolph Lundgren inside the bus.
Right, I forgot about that.
While Dolph's like driving the bus, so,
and
like,
then he even gets tossed off the bus afterwards and does like a pretty sick roll. So yeah, that sequence was good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, there's some just really decent action going on in this film, and I especially like that they decided to leave it bloody and stuff and everything as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely,
even if some of the more ridiculous elements butt up against it sometimes.
It's what you'd want from a canon movie, honestly.
Yes,
we didn't
exactly.
get from Masters of the Universe. No, I guess at this point, canon was basically dissolved.
Was this one?
Yeah,
of their
they were putting together their bankruptcy productions at this point. This was when they started looking for peons to make films like Cyborgs to repurpose things they've already spent millions of dollars on.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think that this feels like if canon got into the superhero realm, this is what it would.
And maybe
look
they
like.
should get back into it. Honestly, I mean, I guess
that'd be awesome.
One of the two Golden Globes. Are both of them dead?
I'm not
just
sure,
one?
Actually.
I
think it's just one.
Well, if at least one is still alive, I mean, he can. We need him to work his magic. We need him to be the new Kevin Feige or Feige or whatever.
We need a truly body horror Marvel movie. That's what we need.
Well, it's going to be delivered on in Doctor Strange 2. Thank you very much.
I'm sure it will be. Yeah.
But yeah, he does the thing. He tries to save all of the kids because he thinks that it's his fault that he's the one who got the kids put in danger and everything like that. There's a great moment where he's trying to fuck with the Yakuza and he just shoots up all of their gambling dens to just lose the money. And it reminded me of the bit in Rambo First Blood Part 2 where he just takes machine gun fire to the intelligence. Oh, yeah. He's like, whoa, on all the big computer systems and everything. And Dolph's basically just doing like the exact same thing, but to be just like
the arcade, like
slot machines and like and like card tables and stuff like that.
It's also the only time he like actually emotes, which is funny too. The one time that he shows like true passion for something is when he's just blasting a machine gun at a bunch of casino slots. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's just 60 seconds of just sparks and smoke and glass and debris and
and
fire
Dolph screaming.
everywhere.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, which is it's a good visual representation of
the Punisher,
his character's experience.
And honestly, you're not getting that even in what are supposed to be the good action movies like John Wick or whatever. You're kind of like, even those are too much in a bit of a cartoon weightless realm. That there's just something this has that those movies don't.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's Mark Goldblatt who is just again so familiar with when action movies operated like this, and you watch it now, and you could see at the time watching this why people kind of felt like this was kind of like crass and generic, kind of in a way, I guess. Like if this was what all movies looked like to you at the time,
right?
But it's so crazy going back and watching this now, and
and knowing
this is not what movies look like,
quote unquote,
and you're like, it would be great to live in a time where just the average action movie had action scenes that just felt like that.
Yeah.
And just looked like this. Because it all kind of comes to a fold a little bit when he rescues the majority of the kids. He rescues basically every kid, except for one in the big set piece where he literally brings a school bus to the slave trade area, shoves them all in, and then drives away. And there's that big set piece where they're trying to stop him and all of that, but he ends up getting away and he delivers them to the cops, and the cops bring him in, and they do this effective thing where they've captured him and they've confirmed that Frank Castle is alive and that now he's basically just this really insane killing machine essentially. And there's this great scene where according to Goldblatt he intentionally didn't have Dolph Lundgren or Louis Gossett Jr. ever meet each other on set until this scene where Louis Gossett Jr. finally had all of his suspicions confirmed and run in, and he just looks so sad, and he's just yelling at what used to be his best friend, being like, "You're sick, don't you know that?" And he gets that great line where he's like, "What do you call 125 murders in 5 years?" And he's like, "Work in progress."
Yeah, and I gotta say, I myself wasn't all that invested in Jake's scenes prior. I just felt like it was kind of a little bit generic. I do like him as an actor. I thought he was good. The plot and the writing itself of his character was just kind of whatever for me. But when it led up to this scene, I think that those scenes just worked a little more for me, because now it's just kind of unveiling what his motivations were this entire time, and him saying that you've killed 125 people and him reacting that way is just kind of the conclusion of what their plot was going to lead to. So that scene I just found his other stuff a little bit dull, but it led to this, so I end up liking it at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and I like that he gets that bit where he's just like, the Frank I knew died 5 years ago, and you would think that the scene, would normally just be kind of like a generic plot device, and just weirdly enough, both actors, they do try to just make it sad.
Yeah.
And it is just kind of sad watching these two kind of have a falling out where they don't really recognize each other anymore. And Dolph is just this, there are sort of brief hints of flashbacks where he looks like more animated than he is. He looks more like what he would do when he would do his more charismatic buddy cop stuff that he would pursue, like what we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah.
When he had his family and stuff. And those flashbacks are just brutal, man. There's a part where he's just he's getting glimpses of him, where he is now riding through the sewer, but then he gets flashbacks to his kids, and then he cuts back to them, and the kids are now in black clothes, pointing Uzis at him in his house, and then his house explodes.
Yeah.
They're doing these almost very expressive little nightmare sequences where, killing has just absolutely consumed his life, even his memories of his children and everything.
Yeah.
And, it's despite the fact that, again, this is, ultimately, a Marvel film by a guy who was hired because he was familiar enough to competently make the action scenes, I found myself just kind of surprisingly moved by Dolph in the film, which is makes it one of the better performances of his that I think that I've seen. I think he does nail that kind of sad killing machine quality, and he really does take that into the big final set piece.
The 5 o'clock shadow definitely helps.
Yeah.
The painted 5 o'clock shadow. It has to be painted, right? I feel like it's got to be.
Yeah,
too precise.
I don't know if I've ever seen Dolph otherwise with facial hair.
Yeah, I always seen him with the clean shave. This is the filthiest I've ever seen him with his look.
Yeah, well, and also they obviously dyed his hair, because usually he's got the big blonde thing going on too.
Yeah,
and he's got to have the black hair, so he's got to have the black facial hair as well.
And then this leads this basically leads into the big Yakuza dojo finale, right? Where it's just where
they've literally turned
there's so much brutality in this, man. It's an unbelievable
They've turned
finale.
the corporate offices into this dojo, but also there's also a scene too where they just massacre the Italian mob.
Right.
in like a scene that should be like in I don't know, like in something like like a Scorsese or something.
Yeah.
When like she just walks in and they were just like, we're here to negotiate the safe return of our children, and she's just like, oh, the one of you that didn't is the only smart one, and they literally just start fucking shooting them all.
Yeah,
like in the restaurant and stuff like that.
The one I love too, we haven't mentioned her yet, but they have this like one like 100-pound 5'4" white ninja girl that takes her earrings and pins people to the walls with them like they're throwing ninja stars. And I gotta say, she's awesome because she pops up throughout the whole film, and she's always this like mysterious character that's just very skilled and deadly. But by the end, she basically goes up against Dolph as the Punisher, and there's an amazing shot of Dolph ripping through the dojo wall to tackle her, and he tackles her, and then they rip through the other wall, and just watching like 250 pounds, 6'6" Dolph Lundgren tackle this 100-pound 5'4" white woman is so fucking crazy to me. That shot is unbelievable. And then they have a whole sequence where they fight back and forth. She cuts him with the knife, and then there's this wide shot of him just snapping her neck and her collapsing to the ground while they have this red color, like this red lighting going out throughout this whole finale sequence, really. And yeah, I had to mention her because she was great. The brief moments that she has.
Do you think Dolph actually hit that kid in that one scene?
He's like, kid, I'm sorry, but we're doing this for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the only way to make it feel real.
This is how the stars do it, man. You want to be big, right, kid?
Yeah, no, that big finale when he gets into and he just breaks into the Yakuza offices is, genuinely just like really crazy. And it all goes back to the big I think at one point some character says to him, there's a limit to revenge, and he says, I guess I haven't reached mine yet. And there's this sort of idea that he's doing this because the Italian gangster has said, I just want you to rescue my kid. And as long as you rescue my kid, like, we can go back to doing whatever. He even basically says that, Dolph's like, I'm going to kill you when this is over, but I will help you. I don't want your kid to die. So he's literally just doing all of this to save a kid. And it's, it's supposed to be, to the Punisher, it's a heroic gesture that, he's going in and he's going to help this, this kid not get sold into the slave trade or whatever, or just get knifed by the random Yakuza lady in her makeup. But there's something to be said about how even this, quote unquote heroic final set piece is still just really gruesome and like unforgivingly kind of rendered. And when he's just like ripping through like the paper barriers, and then the power goes out and it turns like all red in the rooms, and he gets into like a legit karate fight with those. I think those two guys are the two guys who are actual karate champions that he fights in that scene.
Okay, yeah, that's a great scene where the one guy gets pinned to the wall with a spear.
Yeah, you get the Dutch angle moving camera and these wide shots of these guys fighting, and he viciously like spears a dude, lifts him, and then like gores him onto the wall. Like,
and
Michael
he remains
Myers
there
style.
the rest of the fight, which is really cool because like as he's fighting the other guy, you just
you
see
can
him
still see him
hanging in the background. Yeah, so that was cool.
That's so sick.
Yeah, very, very cool.
And then he kicks the other one onto like the decorative like sword piece and everything like that.
I also like when they go into the dojo the first time and there's like 50 dudes practicing martial arts or with swords or something.
Oh, and they just machine gun fire them
all down. Yeah, like there's no honor in it at all. It's just everybody's dead. It's hilarious in a way.
Yeah. So this sequence is just really, really brutal, and it's handled, really stylishly with some of the camera moves, and with the right pushes when they're called in for and everything like that. Like that fight that he does with the girl. Like there's parts where like the camera is literally like lunging over the shoulders, like with their punches and kicks and stuff at each other.
Oh yeah,
which is just it really gets you invested in that fight, even though again this is like this really tiny woman, and Dolph Lundgren is like
huge,
6'5".
like huge. Yeah, and then there's also a really cool part where this is after the red lighting sequence where the Yakuza leader woman has the knife to the mafia boss's son, like his neck. And they do this cool sequence where the camera spins all the way around her and then goes to Franco, who is the father. And then she forces him to like put his gun in his mouth, and he's crying. And she's like, "If you don't kill yourself, brutal. I'll kill my son. I'll kill your son." Like, it is fucking dark. It gets really, really brutal and pretty wild. And I just didn't expect. I knew, like, you know, it's the Punisher, so I knew there was going to be a lot of brutality and stuff. But I just didn't think I didn't know it was going to go as far as it did. And it, I appreciated it for sure.
Well, yeah, and then when Dolph actually, you know, he takes the Yakuza boss down and saves the kid, and the dad gets reunited with him, the dad immediately goes, you know, well, now my little crime lord son is going to inherit my empire.
And you'll kill him, so I have to kill you.
Yeah. And, Dolph literally just brutally kills his dad in front of a kid.
Yeah. I also like the part where the kid tries to stop his dad, and the dad like pushes him off and all that. So there's some fun little complications there.
There is some kid violence.
Yeah,
that's what I said. Dolph actually hit the kid. That's what I meant.
Yeah. We always respect some fuck them kid cinema around here.
Yeah, well, and then the kid's like, the end of this movie is like literally the kid holding the gun up at the guy who killed his dad, being like, "I'm gonna kill you," and then him just egging the kid on, just being like, "Good, get it over with, blow my like fucking brains out."
Yeah, man. And then he threatens him anyway. He's like, "Look, you know, you'll be fine. Just behave yourself, and I won't come back to murder you."
He'll probably
grow up to be a good man.
He'll probably grow up to be AJ Soprano, a real Phil son.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, the fact that the big climax of this is Dolph Lundgren murdering a kid's dad in front of him, and then telling the kid to blow his brains out, and then basically being like, "I will come for you if you don't behave," like he's like fucking, you know, naughty or nice Santa Claus shit.
Yeah.
Then the kid just sitting next to his dead dad, like crying. And then his partner, Louis Gossett Jr., walks in on this and sees all of the bodies that he's left. He follows the blood trail out of the building to the outside, where he gets on the outside of the building.
The rooftop, actually.
Yeah, to the rooftop, where he tears up and just screams Frank at like the top of his lungs, cut to black.
Yeah. And then you have Punisher going like, "I still talk to God sometimes. I'm still waiting for an answer. The guilty will be punished."
I ask him if what I'm doing is right or wrong. And all I could think about was just stuff. Like how, like genuinely how, like gruesome and dark that movie like ends up getting.
Yeah, because there's no real
and then
happiness.
It leaves you there.
It's like everyone is still left with everything they kind of began with. Like the kid now doesn't have a father. The Franco is dead. The Yakuza leader girl is dead. The Punisher is just going to continue going on his murder spree, and Jake has still lost his friend to the, you know, the abyss of evil and violence and everything else. So it's like, yeah, there's truly nothing good that happens by the end of this film.
Yeah, unlike Masters of the Universe, this could teach kids an important lesson that, you know, parents do die.
Yeah, show this one to your kids, not Masters of the Universe. Come on.
Yeah, they're going to learn the right lessons from this one.
Exactly. Behave, or the Punisher will murder you.
Killing can look pretty cool when it's done on screen well. But yeah, that's where it ends off, and maybe pivoting towards reductive rating round. This one actually gets the 4 from me. I really enjoy what Goldblatt is doing, taking all of his skills for, you know, sort of like the rhythm of shooting and cutting, sort of, you know, tangible action together, and applying it to, you know, something as silly as, you know, Frank Castle sewer base, where he meditates naked to candles and fights, you know, scuba ninjas and, you know, various other, you know, does various fights in drug trafficking docks and run down Coney Island fun houses.
This man shit.
And shiny corporate office spaces that he eventually paints red, and he uses like 10 kinds of guns, like shotguns and M16s, and at one point he does pull out the full out like Tommy gun, the harpoons, katanas, spears. He basically kills,
got it all.
Yeah, and I think that this is again, as we kind of mentioned, a great showcase for Dolph, who, even though he's doing a dead-eyed stare and kind of like the deep voice with the accent, with the makeup beard, the fact that it's goofy and lurid at the same time and has children being beat up and traumatized, and
is a positive thing around here.
Yeah, it just goes in indulgent 80s action movie mode in very gruesome and kind of sad ways. And despite the fact that this is a low budget movie shot in Australia, it feels like a convincingly stylish American action film.
Yeah,
and there's mood and carnage to it, and Goldblatt, he's got the vocabulary for this brand of genre movie. He's got it down like inside and out. So I gotta say, I think that this is one of the better Lundgren vehicles. I combined Dolph.
Yeah, I like that. I like
word.
that.
This is one of the better vehicles for him. So I would recommend, if you're gonna check one out, that this would be one for sure. And
yeah,
also
top
too,
of the list.
I do, think that, again, Lundgren doing that kind of blank 80s action star performance, does end up really working for the film. You do get the feeling that Frank is like this robotic husk that only ever briefly, as Jamie said, becomes excited or animated when he's destroying something on screen, essentially.
Yeah, and I like that we actually get that image too. It's really good. I'd give it the 4 as well. I actually ended up watching this twice because the first time, just some of the cop stuff dragged it down for me a little bit, but then once I knew where it led, it worked for me. I think I did mention that, but the Jake stuff became more interesting once they had that confrontation in the jail cell. I think that was a really good scene, and really fleshed out their relationship and where they were at that point. So that was really good. And then really just the brutality of this movie is what sells it for me. This is very true to like what The Punisher, I think, should be. And you have that finale sequence with the purely red lighting in a Yakuza dojo, and there's samurai swords and people being pinned to walls with spears, and Dolph
dismembered
fighting a 100-pound ninja girl that has earrings that like cut people, and like it's very, very crazy. But I think what separates this one from the others that we've talked about so far with Dolph is that this one has a very consistent tone, and it never feels like or rarely feels, at least, like it's being silly and out of place with that silliness. So this just I think felt true to what it was trying to do the entire time, rather than stray away every once in a while. And the brutality on this is really awesome, really true to The Punisher. So 4 out of 5
for you, Ethan.
Unlike He-Man, The Punisher is an intellectual property I have a bit of attachment to. I have read many Punisher comics, and I think this does the man, Frank Castle, it does him proud. And I honestly would have loved to have seen Dolph Lundgren's Frank Castle interact with the rest of the Marvel universe, like Namor, Namor the Submariner, or She-Hulk, or whatever. So yeah, it's a good movie. Love seeing him ride around on that motorcycle. Good ownage. Solid 3 stars.
Nice.
Hell yeah. Well, and 2, I was gonna say, it's so funny. Like, did they intend to make sequels out of this? Because it's such a dark place to leave. Like, it's just like, his partner screaming at the top of his lungs, a kid crying, and they're like, next time. On the Punisher.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that kid is being set up to try to kill Frank later.
Also, this was released direct to video in the United States, wasn't it?
Yeah. They didn't have a whole. Eventually, I guess New World Pictures, they didn't have a whole lot of confidence of it once they actually got it in.
It's a shame,
even though it got released theatrically, like overseas, and it didn't do amazing, but it also wasn't like as terrible as other
like
films
Masters
that have been received. So
was it more of a success than Masters of the Universe?
I think financially, I don't know if critically.
Gotcha.
Dolph has never had the critic class on his side, I don't think.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But that's good. That's a sign of an actor.
Damn right.
Who means something.
Though, curiously, it's worth noting that around this time, Dolph was actually attached to an unmade Andrei Zulawski film.
What the hell?
Wow.
Yeah, that never got made because apparently the financiers were literal criminals and financing fell through at the last minute. But it was going to be like a Vietnam War drama starring Dolph and directed by Zulawski.
Damn.
I think that, I would have loved, I think Dolph's had a great career, but I'd like to see him have just a couple more auteurs under his belt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, that is a great segue because we are going to be, as we've mentioned, doing an entire month of Dolph films here on the pod, so we should lay out some of those titles because we know that a lot of you will be able to have a chance to watch them in advance here.
Yeah.
But next week, we're going to be back with a bonus episode over on the Patreon where we're going to be talking about Craig R. Baxley's Dark Angel from 1990, which is Dolph Lundgren as a Texas vice cop taking on alien drug dealers.
A CD-wielding alien drug dealer.
Yes. And directed by the guy who did one of the most underrated 90s action films, Stone Cold, with Brian Bosworth.
That's a banger.
So that movie is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. And then also we're going to be talking about Showdown in Little Tokyo from 1991, directed by Mark L. Lester, who directed Commando that Mark Goldblatt edited, and also directed Class of 1984, which is just one of the nastiest 80s movies I think that I've seen.
So wild, yeah. Still got to check out that sequel.
Dolph do a buddy cop film with Brandon Lee, R.I.P., and learning his Japanese roots, Steven Seagal style. So that's going to be the bonus episode next week, and then the free episode on the main feed in 2 weeks' time is going to be back with a special guest. We're going to have Cameron from the Pod About List podcast, where we're going to be talking about Universal Soldier, 1992, Roland Emmerich.
Very awesome.
Obviously spawned an entire franchise of films. Obviously, it's Lundgren versus Jean-Claude Van Damme. So there's going to be some good ownage there. There's a big climactic fight at the end of that between the two, which I won't spoil for Jamie because he hasn't seen it, but it has a pretty crazy ending to it.
Awesome.
And we're going to be pairing that with Johnny Mnemonic. By Robert Longo, starring Keanu Reeves. So we're going kind of Dolph Lundgren in villain mode with that double feature, sci-fi villain mode, because he is the henchman for Takeshi Kitano in the Johnny Mnemonic film.
Yeah,
and
it's
then,
a lot of fun.
In 3 weeks' time, for the very last episode of Dolph Lundgren Month, for your guys' bonus episode, we're going to be talking about Silent Trigger, 1996, directed by Russell Mulcahy, famously directed Highlander.
Awesome.
Razorback,
Awesome.
Resident Evil Extinction for the Resident Evil heads. So we're going to be talking about Russell Mulcahy because Dolph, he basically worked with every low-budget action movie auteur that we've ever covered on this show. And that being said, the very last one, I think this is one that Ethan's talked to us about, Blackjack from 1998, directed by John Woo, which I haven't seen, but from what I understand is a TV movie with John Woo and Dolph Lundgren, and I don't know what else I need.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Ethan, if you've got anything to plug, this is usually the part of the show where we have you do that.
Well, I'll probably keep reviewing some movies for thefilmstage.com. Maybe some stuff will show up on other places too. There's a lot of movies coming out. Hopefully I'll get to review The Boss Baby 2 or whatever. But
we can only hope.
Yeah. But yeah, just follow me on twitter.com/EthanVest, because if I write anything, I'll retweet it. And I enjoy appearing on podcasts, to be honest. This is a lot of fun, being a kind of a perennial like TV guest star. You don't have your own show, but you're always popping up on The Love Boat or Batman or whatever. So if you're listening to this and you have a podcast, I'm always excited to be invited on.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks so much, Ethan, for joining us this
Yes,
week and
thank
for taking the Dolph man seriously, because
he deserves it.
It's hard to find people out there who will, but we're gonna have a lot of fun, and hopefully we're gonna get some people to take a second look at some films that they've maybe watched before that they weren't crazy about that he's been in, because I know that I've had that experience myself happen, and I've had it happen for others as well.
Yeah.
And by the very end of this, we will have lots of recommendations on all of his modern direct-to-video stuff for you guys to check out.
Definitely,
because I've been catching up on a lot of those as well. There's the more stinkers than good ones, I think, so far from the mid 2000s onward. But there's definitely some fun stuff in there. And man, the man even started directing at one point.
Awesome.
But yeah, that being said, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. That was Masters of the Universe from 1987 and The Punisher from 1989. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Sock it to me. Or keep it sleazy, sorry.